Welcome back to Asterigos Curse of the Stars. In this video, I'm going to give you 15 tips for new players when you start playing the game on the 11th of October 2022. Now, since the game doesn't come with a map that you can use to track where you are, you have to use clues like this, like those white lines on the ground or these blue marks that you will often find throughout the game to guide you where you need to go for your current objective or just to further explore some areas. The next tip is to make use of the shop that is located in the shelter. So following this path here, when you get to the shelter, after doing one of your very first missions, you should have this guy here set up shop right over here, and you can buy things that you're going to need from him. So things like potions that he sells infinite amounts of, teleport scrolls and things like that, charged bombs and whatnot. Some of these do sell out, like when you buy them, there's no option to buy more of them. You can also buy rare materials if you go to the second tab here to upgrade your weapons and equipment. You shall also be able to sell some stuff here, but I highly recommend not just selling random stuff because you will actually use pretty much most of this in crafting. So I recommend not really selling anything at all. The next feature you should be aware of is the storage feature here. So the lady here in the red dress, if you talk to her, she'll have the option to open up your storage, and this is where you can find all the extra potions and things that you can carry. Now, in the game, you actually have a limitation of how many potions and stuff you can have in your inventory, and often when you use those potions, you have to come back to the shelter to replenish your stock in your inventory by taking them out of your storage here or buying them from the shop. Now let's talk about upgrading your weapons to make sure that they do more damage. Now from the starting place over here, we're going to run to the right in the shelter here to this lady over here, this like fox furry lady, and you'll see you can go to upgrade weapons and actually use resources and materials that you find to upgrade those. You're also able to craft trinkets, and these can boost your defense by an insane amount. As you can see here, they have like different like resistance types to slash damage, thrust damage, or even different types of the elements of the enemies attacking you so that you can make sure that you reduce the damage you take by a lot, and this is incredibly effective, and you'll unlock tons of these as you play the game. Also keep in mind, as you find things in the open world, you can actually go use the talk option here and go into like the different things, and you might find these yellow kind of markers here as side quests to unlock new trinkets or things that you find out in the world, like the new trinket designs. My next tip is to explore everywhere. In every little corner of every area, there's things to find, story to be read, and like, discover and follow along with. And I highly recommend you follow along with it because the game doesn't have a map. You really need to keep on track with what's happening in the game so that you know what you're supposed to do next, because it's very easy to get lost and not know how to proceed. I should also mention that sometimes you unlock things in the game that open up doors or make things change in areas that you've already explored, so you might have to run back to re-explore and see if there's anything you missed from the first run through. You'll also be able to find chests and treasure bags throughout the game, and these will have materials that you use for upgrading your weapons, for crafting, trinkets, all sorts of things. So make sure you're constantly picking these up and searching different areas to find these, because sometimes they can be hidden really well, like behind a random pot plant in a little corner somewhere. There's always something hiding and waiting to be collected. A lot of your side quests comes from things that you can interact with on the ground, on the floor, things that you read, little different stories. Like in this Arches Plaza here with these doors that have the lights on them, when you go and knock on them, sometimes they'll talk to you and actually give you a side quest, and you might not even know it's a side quest, but they'll ask you to do something for them. So always pay attention and always be exploring and focusing on what you're reading and what people are telling you. Asterigos also comes with a cool feature where you have element enchantites that change your element of your character's damage type, as well as your spells and everything. So this works for all the weapons. Like you can have your magic type of thing here where you can swap to fire and everything will become fire based. Now different enemies are weaker to different elements, which you'll have to figure out yourself. And you can also use these in different kind of puzzles in the game. Like if you see fire like this, you need the ice enchantite to basically turn the fire off. And you get the ice enchantite really early on in the game, so use that to turn out fire. You'll also be able to find the poisonous vines like this over here, and now when you use fire, you can actually burn these so that they disappear. You just have to attack it a few times until it burns up and disappears and opens up a whole new pathway. Now, going hand in hand with collecting things that you find on the ground, you'll often find dog tags around the entire game, and you can bring these to Bion over here, and when you go to his talk thing here, the very last option will be able to show him the dog tags. He'll tell you a story, as well as giving you some rare crafting item or material that you can use for upgrading or crafting. Now, there are teleport items in the game, and especially in early game you'll use these, but later on you're probably not going to. But in early game you have the memento, which will take 10% of your stardust to teleport you to the last conduit that you used. You also have the aetheryte silver, which does the same thing but will just consume the silver instead. Or you have the Rhodas symbol, which will teleport you back to the shelter, which is really handy early on in the game when you're far away from the shelter and you don't want to run all the way back. You can actually buy these from the shop as well for about 100 stardust. Stardust you get from killing enemies, so 100 stardust is not insane. While you're exploring the game, and you can also find this in the demo, you'll find these cute little bunny critters. Now, they have a little bag in their mouth, and when you kill them or defeat them, because they don't actually die, they just burrow into the ground and disappear, they drop a Morning Star elixir that allows you to get 1 free attribute point to further increase your damage, your health, or even your abilities damage. So just go make sure you use this from your inventory to apply it, and just pick a stat that you want to increase. Now let's talk about our next tip, quick items. Quick items are pretty cool. I recommend using the charged bomb the entire time, but you get things like the throwing dagger, the glimmer, and the charged bomb, as well as putting other things here in your quick items like potions and stardust elixirs to increase your mana to use spells and abilities. Sometimes throughout the game you'll find like loot bags hanging from a string or something. I recommend using the daggers to break the rope, or you can even use the staff to attack it. If you want to deal more damage to enemies, using the charged bomb is really good. It also changes to the element that you're using. So if you're using fire or astral or ice, it will turn into one of those elements when it hits the enemy. And then the final one is something that you get early on, and this is something I keep on the entire game, and that is Glimmer. It will be in your inventory, you just activate it. This gives you a little light so that you can see through caves so that your screen's just not like dark the entire time. The biggest tip I can give you for doing as much damage as possible is relying on your skills, picking skills that you know do really well from testing. Like, for example, here is a skill that is for the staff kind of talent tree, and you can see here, using this ability allows me to defeat the enemy a lot faster than if I had to just use normal attacks. So when you're picking talents, make sure you pick the talents that increase your damage as much as possible. Now, each weapon in the game is a completely different playstyle. Let's start off with the staff that we just looked at. The staff obviously is a playstyle where you can play from far, but once enemies get close to you, it might turn into a different kind of feat. You can obviously use different elements to change the effectiveness of your spells by changing how they work. But since you can always have 2 weapons with you, there's also something like the daggers, which basically play on a aggressive playstyle, doing lots of attacks in short succession, also allowing you to dodge enemies a lot quicker and dart in and out of combat so that you can just keep dealing damage. The sword and shield is, as you can imagine, it's a very defensive playstyle. You can hold up your shield as one of your special abilities, I guess you can call it. It's not really a skill or anything, but you hold up your shield, you can block attacks. It does cost you stamina to do this, and the very final hit of your sword is very powerful. But you'll find that to be the case in all the weapons, that their final hit is great. The spear is absolutely fantastic. I love the spear because it has a counter mechanic where you press the counter button and it allows you to go straight into a new attack that allows you to do a lot of damage with a nice thrusting strike, and it's really fun to actually counter attacks. The magical bracelets are more of a prepared kind of fighting style. It's like setting up your bombs or traps beforehand and luring your enemies into the traps so that they can explode. And it also does like semi-ranged kind of attacks, not really super ranged, more just like anything directly in front of it. So I don't know if you can really even call it ranged, but the little bombs like that are really powerful and also nice to kind of surprise enemies with it. The final weapon is the hammer, and I think the recommended playstyle for this is just to go balls to the wall, go straight up aggressiveness. It's probably the hardest weapon for me to play because I constantly trade damage, and in this game when you trade damage, it's really easy to take too much damage and die, especially in cases where you're fighting bosses. But you do a lot of damage with your hits with the hammer, so I guess maybe it's a fair trade-off. And those are my 15 tips for new players who are going to be jumping into Asterigos Curse of the Stars when it releases. I hope you guys enjoy the game, and thank you so much for watching.